Before we begin, close your eyes. You were 7 years old the first time your father made you swear an oath. Not a small promise. A blood oath, sworn at an altar, your small hand pressed to a sacrifice still warm beneath it. Promising an enemy you had never met that you would hate them for the rest of your life. 36 years later, that enemy would come closer to total destruction than at any other point in its 1,000-year history. Because of you, this is Hannibal Barca. Tonight you live his story from the inside. It moves fast, and it does not flinch from what war actually looked like in the ancient world. Elephants dying in the snow, fog thick with the screams of trapped legions. A single afternoon at a place called Cannae, where more Roman soldiers died than in any battle before or since in the empire's entire history. Let it pull you forward exactly the way it pulled the ancient world's attention toward one furious, brilliant man for almost 2 decades. And when it's finally over, let it lay you down completely into the deepest kind of sleep. Breathe in. You are Hannibal. And tomorrow. This is your war. The oath at the altar. You don't remember deciding to hate Rome. You remember being taught to Carthage. Your home sits across the sea from Rome as its oldest and bitterest rival. 2 great powers competing for the same trade routes, the same islands, the same right to call the Western Sea their own. A war between them ended before you were old enough to understand it, and it ended badly for Carthage. Ships lost, territory stripped away, a humiliating peace that your father, the General Hannibal Barca, has never once accepted as final. You are 9 years old when he takes you to the temple. You remember the smell of it first, thick incense and old stone, and the particular seriousness in your father's face, a seriousness you've never seen directed at you before. He kneels beside a sacrificial altar, blood from the offering still dark and warm across the stone, and he takes your small hand and presses it down into that warmth. Swear it, he tells you. Swear to me now that you will never be a friend to Rome. You feel the weight of that moment settle into your chest. Young enough that you don't fully understand what you're promising, old enough to understand that whatever it is, it matters more than almost anything else in your father's world. You swear it. You will spend the next 4 decades keeping that. Promise with a thoroughness that will make your name a word Roman mothers used to frighten disobedient children for centuries. Afterward, raised for your father takes you to Iberia not long after, the region the Romans call Spain, where Carthage is rebuilding everything the last war cost it. New silver mines, new cities, a new army built from scratch, trained hard, funded by wealth pulled directly out of Iberian mountains. You grow up inside a military camp. Instead of a childhood, you learn to ride before you're fully grown into your own body. You learn tactics the way other boys your age learn games, studying formations in the dirt with a stick, watching real campaigns unfold around you, instead of hearing about them secondhand. Your father doesn't shield you from any of it. He wants you hardened, capable, ready to inherit not just his ambition, but his exact, specific hatred. You watch him die when you are still a teenager. killed in a river during a campaign against local tribes, and you feel something shift permanently in your chest at the loss. Not simply grief, something colder settling in alongside it. Your father's obsession with Rome doesn't die with him. If anything, it transfers directly into you, sharpened now by the fact that you're the one left to finish what he started. Command eventually passes to you fully after your brother-in-law, who led Carthage's forces in Iberia after your father, is assassinated by a servant with a personal grudge. You are 26 years old. You feel the full weight of an army, a war, and a promise made at 9 years old settle onto your shoulders all at once. You do not hesitate. The city that lit the if you see you know exactly what you're doing when you march your army toward Saguntum. The city sits technically outside the boundary Rome and Carthage agreed on after the last war. Allied to Rome, but sitting well within territory Carthage now controls in Iberia. You know provoking a siege here risks reigniting the exact war your father spent his final years preparing for. You do it anyway. The siege drags on for 8 brutal months. The city's defenders refusing surrender long past the point where surrender would have been the reasonable choice. You order the walls breached eventually through relentless, grinding assault. And what follows inside those walls is not gentle dot accounts describe citizens choosing death over capture. Some throwing themselves and their own families onto fires rather than face what conquest typically meant for a defeated city in this era. Your soldiers move through the streets afterward with the brutal efficiency wars in this period always demanded. The city's wealth stripped, its population scattered into slavery or death. You feel no hesitation reviewing the cost of that siege. This was never simply about Saguntum. This was the first move in a war you've been preparing your entire life to fight, and you knew exactly what triggering it would cost on both sides. Before you ever gave the order to attack, word reaches Rome fast. Demands are sent to Carthage, insisting you be handed over for punishment. Carthage refuses. The formal declaration of war follows within weeks, exactly as you calculated it would. You feel something settle into place in your chest, cold and absolute. The war your father swore you to has finally, officially begun. Crossing the mountains, nitrogen monoxide, army CROSS. Rome expects you to fight defensively in Iberia, or perhaps attempt a naval crossing. They can intercept easily with their superior fleet. You do neither. You march an army of tens of thousands of soldiers, along with dozens of war elephants overland through southern Gaul, toward a mountain range no organized army has ever successfully crossed with a force this size. The Alps. You know what you're asking of your men before you even begin the ascent, and you order the crossing anyway because the alternative, a naval battle against Rome's superior fleet, offers far worse odds than mountains that have never actually stopped a determined army, only ones that never tried hard enough. What follows is one of the most brutal marches in ancient military history, and none of it is exaggerated for effect. Local mountain tribes attack your columns from the high ground, rolling boulders down onto soldiers trapped on narrow paths with nowhere to retreat, picking off stragglers with a savagery born from defending their own territory against an invading foreign army. You watch men and animals pushed off narrow, icy paths into ravines hundreds of feet below. Their screams cut short by the fall long before they hit whatever waits at the bottom. The cold intensifies as you climb higher, temperatures dropping brutally enough that soldiers who survive tribal ambush start dying anyway. Frostbite blackening fingers and feet, exhaustion claiming men who simply lie down in the snow and don't get back up. The elephants suffer horrifically in conditions their bodies were never built to endure, several dying along the route. Their massive bodies left frozen and abandoned on mountain paths behind you. You lose. By the time you finally descend into Italy, something close to half the force you started this march with, thousands of men, most of your elephants, an almost unimaginable cost paid before you fought a single battle against the enemy you actually came here to face. You feel that cost settle heavy into your chest. Standing at the base of the mountains, looking out at Italian territory no Carthaginian army has ever successfully reached by this route. But you are here. Rome does not yet know it. But the war it expected to fight defensively along its own coastline has just arrived, unannounced, directly inside its own territory. A night in the high PSSES, one night during the ascent, stays with you more vividly than almost any other memory from this entire war. And it happens before you fought a single Roman soldier. Your column is strung out along a narrow path cut into a cliffside, barely wide enough in places for a single pack animal to pass. Sheer rock rising on one side and a drop of hundreds of feet on the other. Local tribesmen who know this terrain in ways your exhausted, freezing soldiers never will, choose this exact stretch to attack. You hear it before you see it. Rock dislodged deliberately from high above, crashing down onto the column below in a rain of stone and debris. Men scream as boulders find them directly, crushing armor and bone in an instant. Others, trying desperately to press themselves against the cliff face to avoid the falling rock, lose their footing on ice-slick ground and simply vanish over the edge, their screams cutting off abruptly somewhere far below, swallowed by darkness and distance. Pack animals panic in the chaos, some throwing off critical supplies as they bolt, others driven straight off the path themselves, dragging soldiers still tethered to their loads down into the ravine alongside them. You watch from your position further along the column, unable to reach the worst of it fast enough, as men you've led since Iberia disappear into darkness in the space of a single terrified heartbeat. The attack ends as suddenly as it began. Tribesmen melting back into terrain they know intimately, and your exhausted soldiers cannot safely pursue even if command allowed it. What's left once the chaos settles is a column short several hundred men, its supplies badly damaged, morale cracking visibly on faces already hollowed by cold and exhaustion. You move among your surviving officers that night, forcing calm into your own voice despite the scene still fresh in your mind, insisting the march continue at dawn regardless of what tonight cost. You feel, privately, the true weight of that cost settle deep into your chest, alone in whatever shelter you can find against the freezing night air. This mountain will take more from you before it finally lets you through. You already know it. Rome sends an army to meet you fast, confident that whatever's left of your force after crossing the Alps will be easy to finish off before it can recover. You let them believe that. Along the banks of the Trebia River, you set a trap with the same cold precision that will define every major battle of this war. You hide a significant portion of your remaining force overnight in a stream, freezing and soaked, waiting for exactly the right moment. At dawn, you send a smaller force to provoke the Roman camp into a hasty, poorly prepared response, luring their entire army across the freezing river toward your main position before they've even had breakfast. The Roman soldiers arrive already exhausted, already half frozen from wading through icy water, already fighting at a severe disadvantage before the actual battle even begins. You feel the trap close exactly as planned, your hidden force emerging from the stream to slam into their flank and rear at the precise moment their attention is fully consumed by your front line. What follows is brutal, close-quarters slaughter. Roman formations, disciplined under normal conditions, begin disintegrating under the combined pressure of frontal assault and a completely unexpected attack from behind. Men trample each other trying to escape a battle line collapsing in on itself from multiple directions at once. Your elephants, the few that survive the mountains, plow directly through infantry lines, crushing men beneath them in scenes that will haunt Roman survivors for the rest of their lives. By the time the slaughter finally ends, tens of thousands of Roman soldiers lie dead or wounded across the frozen riverbank. Your own losses a fraction of theirs. By comparison, you feel something settle into place watching the scale of that victory become clear. This isn't simply a battle won. This is proof, delivered directly and violently, that everything Rome believed about its own military superiority is about to be tested far more brutally than it has ever been tested before. Word of the defeat spreads through Italy fast. And for the first time in generations, Rome feels something it has rarely been forced to feel about a foreign enemy standing on its own soil. Fear. Rome sends another army, larger, angrier, determined to erase the humiliation of Trebia as quickly as possible. You give them exactly the opportunity their anger is hungry for. You lead your army along the shore of Lake Trasimene into a long, narrow stretch of ground bordered by steep hills on one side and open water on the other. Ground that looks to an army pursuing you in a fury like a straightforward path toward finally catching you. It is a trap built entirely out of geography. You position your forces along the high ground, overlooking that narrow stretch, hidden completely by thick morning fog rolling in off the lake, and you wait for the Roman army to fully commit to the path below before giving the signal. What happens next is less a battle than a massacre, and the ancient accounts describing it don't soften the details. Your forces descend from the fog-shrouded hills on every side simultaneously, catching the entire Roman column strung out along a path with the lake on one flank and your soldiers pouring down the other. There is no room to form proper battle lines. There is no real possibility of organized retreat. Men are pushed into the lake by the sheer press of panicked bodies behind them, weighed down by armor, drowning by the hundreds in water that turns visibly red along the shoreline. The fighting on land is close and brutal. Swords and spears working in chaos too thick for any real tactical control on the Roman side. Soldiers who can't reach the water and can't break through your lines are simply cut down where they stand. The fog itself adding to the horror, muffling screams, hiding the true scale of the slaughter from men only a short distance away who don't yet realize their entire army is being annihilated around them. Accounts afterward describe the fighting as so intense, so all-consuming that a significant earthquake struck the region during the battle, and soldiers on both sides were apparently too consumed by the violence to even notice the ground shaking beneath their feet. By the time it's over, an entire Roman army has effectively ceased to exist. Tens of thousands dead, thousands more captured, the consul commanding Roman forces killed in the chaos, his body found afterward among the countless others scattered along that narrow, blood-soaked shoreline. You feel the full weight of that victory settle into your chest, watching the scale of destruction spread out along the lake's edge in the fog-thinning light. 2 major armies destroyed in less than a year. Rome is no longer simply worried that Rome is, for the first time since its founding, staring directly at the possibility of total, catastrophic defeat. Rome's response to 2 catastrophic defeats is to raise the largest army it has ever fielded, determined to overwhelm you through sheer, crushing numbers rather than risk further tactical humiliation. You meet that enormous force near a small town called Cannae, and what happens there will be studied by military commanders for the next 2,000 years as one of the most complete tactical annihilations in the history of warfare. Your army is significantly outnumbered. You know this. You plan around it anyway, with a level of calculated confidence that borders on audacity. You deliberately arrange your center in a formation that bulges slightly outward toward the enemy, weaker there by design, while your strongest infantry waits positioned on the flanks. When the massive Roman force finally engages, their sheer numbers push directly into that weakened, bulging center exactly as you intended, your line slowly giving ground in a controlled, deliberate retreat that makes the Roman commanders believe, in the heat of battle, that they're winning. They're walking directly into a trap. As their center presses deeper and deeper into what looks like a collapsing formation. Your flanking forces hold firm, and then, at the precise moment their entire massive army has fully committed to that forward push, your flanks close inward around both sides of their formation. Simultaneously, cavalry you've held in reserve slams into their rear, completing an encirclement so total and so perfectly executed that the enormous Roman army suddenly finds itself completely surrounded, on every single side, by a force they still, technically, outnumbered. Numbers stop mattering the moment an army loses the ability to maneuver. What follows is not really a battle anymore. It's a slaughter conducted with horrifying mechanical efficiency. packed so tightly together that most Roman soldiers can't even raise their weapons properly, trapped on every side with nowhere to retreat. They are cut down in place, rank after rank, for hours, the killing continuing long after any real resistance has become possible. Ancient historians, describing the aftermath, don't exaggerate for effect, because the reality needs no exaggeration. Somewhere between 50 and 70,000 Roman soldiers die in a single afternoon, a number so catastrophic that Rome will not lose that many soldiers in a single day of battle again for the rest of its ancient history. The ground around Cannae is described as being so thick with bodies that survivors afterward have to climb over the dead, simply to walk across the battlefield. Blood is said to have pooled deep enough in low areas of the field to have literally changed the color of the ground for a long time afterward. You walk that battlefield yourself once the killing finally stops, and you feel something complicated settle into your chest, studying the sheer, staggering scale of what your tactics have just accomplished. Not regret, not exactly. Something closer to a cold, exhausted awareness that you have just done something history will never fully be able to look away from. Word reaches Rome, and the reaction is not simply fear anymore. It's something closer to panic, bordering on despair. Roman accounts describe the city itself in a state of near total collapse. Families discovering entire bloodlines wiped out in a single afternoon. The Senate debating openly whether the city itself might soon fall. You have just delivered, in the space of a single afternoon, the most complete military disaster Rome will ever experience. Your officers expect you to march directly on Rome itself now, to finish what Cannae started while the city is still reeling, undefended in ways it may never be again. You don't. Historians will debate this decision for the next 2,000 years, and you feel the weight of that choice yourself, even as you make it. Standing at the edge of your camp, studying reports of Rome's chaotic, panicked state. Your own army, despite its staggering victory, is exhausted, undersupplied, lacking the specialized siege equipment a direct assault on Rome's formidable walls would actually require to succeed rather than simply bleed itself out against fortifications built specifically to withstand exactly this kind of attack. You choose instead to continue the war differently, hoping the sheer scale of your victories will fracture Rome's alliance system across Italy, convincing city after city to abandon Rome and join your cause instead. Some do. Capua, one of the wealthiest cities in southern Italy, opens its gates to you, offering your exhausted army rest, supplies, and comfortable winter quarters after years of brutal campaigning. You allow your soldiers that rest, and you feel, watching them finally sleep in real beds after years of frozen mountain passes and blood-soaked battlefields, that the decision is a reasonable one. It will become, in the retelling, one of the most debated choices of your entire career. Some accounts will claim the comfort of Capua softened your army's discipline, that the edge carrying you from Trebia to Trasimene to Cannae dulled during that long, comfortable winter in ways that ultimately cost you the the momentum you'd fought so hard to build. You don't fully know, standing in this moment, exactly what history will eventually decide about that choice. What you do know is that Rome, given time to recover from its own devastation, is already rebuilding, already adapting, already learning the hard, brutal lessons your 3 great victories taught. It about facing you directly on open ground. The war is far from finished, but the easiest path to ending it decisively, the door Cannae briefly kicked wide open, is closing behind you a little more with every week that passes. Rome changes its entire strategy after Cannae, and you feel that shift the moment it takes hold. No more massive armies sent to meet you in open battle. No more opportunities for the kind of decisive, annihilating victories that made your name a source of genuine terror across the Italian countryside. A Roman commander named Fabius adopts a deliberately cautious strategy instead, shadowing your movements, harassing your supply lines, refusing absolutely to commit to the kind of open confrontation that has cost Rome 3 catastrophic armies already. You feel a specific, grinding frustration settle into your chest as the years stretch on under this new reality. You are, without question, the single most feared military commander in the ancient world at this point in your life, and that reputation, ironically, is now working against you, because no Roman commander is foolish enough anymore to hand you the kind of open battlefield opportunity that made Trebia, Trasimene, and Cannae possible in the first place. You continue campaigning across Italy for years, winning smaller engagements, maintaining your army's presence as a genuine threat Rome cannot simply ignore. But the decisive, war-ending victory you need continues to slip further out of reach with every passing season. Reinforcements and supplies from Carthage arrive inconsistently, hampered by Rome's continued naval superiority and by political factions back home who have never fully supported your aggressive strategy the way your father once dreamed they would. You feel that lack of support as its own kind of betrayal, watching opportunities slip away for lack of resources that should have been flowing steadily to an army still technically winning this war on Italian soil. Years accumulate this way. Victories that don't quite translate into the total collapse Rome experienced after Cannae. A war of attrition slowly favoring an enemy with deeper resources, a larger population to draw fresh soldiers from, and, increasingly, commanders finally smart enough to avoid the exact mistakes that cost their predecessors everything. You feel, somewhere in the middle of this long, grinding stretch of the war, the first real doubt creeping into your calculations. Time, which once felt like your greatest weapon, sharpened by patience and tactical brilliance, is slowly becoming your greatest enemy instead. Word reaches you eventually of what's happening back in Africa, and you feel the entire shape of this war shift beneath your feet the moment you understand it fully. Rome, unable to defeat you decisively on Italian soil, has changed its strategy entirely. A young, aggressive commander named Scipio has taken the fight directly to Carthage itself, invading North Africa, threatening your home city with the exact kind of total Existential danger you spent years inflicting on Italy. Carthage panics. The same government that starved your Italian campaign of consistent support for years now demands your immediate return. Desperate for the one commander capable of saving the city from a threat you spent your entire life trying to inflict on someone else's home instead, you feel a bitter, complicated fury at that demand, standing in Italy after more than 15 years of campaigning on foreign soil. Everything you built here, every victory paid for in blood and frozen mountain passes, and years away from everything familiar, is being abandoned now because the war has finally, ironically, come home to threaten the people who never fully supported you. While you were busy nearly destroying their greatest enemy, you have no real choice. You gather what remains of your veteran army, men who have fought beside you since Italy first felt like an impossible mountain crossing rather than a 15-year home, and you sail back toward Africa, toward a homeland many of your soldiers haven't seen in over a decade, toward a final confrontation with an enemy that has finally, after years of catastrophic defeats, learned enough to potentially beat you. You feel the weight of that. Irony settled heavy into your chest during the long crossing. Home. The empire you swore, at 9 years old, to hate for your entire life is about to force you into the single most important battle of your entire career on ground you once called home, against a commander who has spent years studying every single tactic that made you the most feared man in the ancient world. You meet Scipio's army on a dry plain near a place called Zama, and you feel studying the enemy formation across that open ground, something you have rarely felt across 2 decades of warfare. Uncertainty. Your army here is not the same brutally experienced force that annihilated 3 Roman armies in Italy. Years of attrition, the long recall, the desperate scramble to rebuild a defensive force in Africa have left you commanding a mixture of veterans and far less experienced troops. Elephants that haven't been properly trained for this specific battlefield, and allied cavalry whose loyalty you suspect with growing dread may not hold under real pressure. Scipio, meanwhile, has spent years studying exactly how you won every major battle of your career, and you feel that preparation working against you from the very first moments of the engagement. You send your war elephants forward first, hoping to recreate the same terrifying disruption they caused years earlier in Italy. Scipio has prepared specifically for this, ordering his forces to create wide lanes in their formation that let the panicked, wounded elephants simply run harmlessly through and past his lines, rather than trampling through packed infantry, the way they once did against unprepared enemies. The battle that follows is brutal, exhausting, and for the first time in your career, agonizingly close. Your infantry fights with the same desperate ferocity that carried you through 15 years of Italian campaigns. And for a long, grinding stretch of the fighting, the outcome remains genuinely uncertain. But your cavalry, the exact advantage that completed your perfect encirclement at Cannae, fails you here, outmatched and eventually driven from the field by Roman and allied Numidian cavalry that Scipio has cultivated specifically to counter the advantage that once made you unstoppable. You feel the battle turning, slowly and then all at once, as that same cavalry, having chased your own forces from the field, wheels back and slams into your infantry's rear, recreating with horrifying precision the exact tactical nightmare you once inflicted on Rome at Cannae. You are being defeated by your own masterpiece, turned back against you by a student who learned every lesson you taught him through years of catastrophic Roman defeats. Your army breaks. You watch it happen from the middle of chaos and collapsing formations. Thousands of your soldiers cut down in the same brutal, encircled slaughter you once inflicted so completely on someone else's army, and you feel something break inside your own chest alongside it, watching everything you built across 2 decades finally, completely, come apart in a single devastating afternoon. You survived the battle itself, one of the few senior commanders who manages to escape the collapsing field alive. But the war, you understand immediately, watching your shattered forces scatter across the African plain, is over, and you have lost it. Carthage sues for peace in the aftermath of Zama, accepting terms that strip away almost everything your father's generation and your own spent decades fighting to build. Territory lost, fleets dismantled, crushing payments owed to Rome for years to come. You feel the full, bitter weight of that outcome settle into your chest, watching a peace negotiated on terms that make clear, beyond any argument, exactly how completely this war has ended in your enemy's favor. You remain in Carthage for a time afterward, attempting political reform, trying to rebuild what military catastrophe and decades of internal corruption have badly damaged. But Rome's suspicion of you never fully fades, and political enemies within Carthage itself, threatened by your continued influence, eventually maneuver against you with a ruthlessness that mirrors everything you once inflicted on Roman armies. You are forced into exile. What follows is a long, restless wandering across the eastern Mediterranean, offering your military expertise to various kings and states still resistant to Rome's growing dominance. Each new alliance eventually collapsing under the same relentless Roman pressure that ended your original war. You advise. You strategize. You watch again and again. Allies who once seemed genuinely committed to resisting Rome eventually calculate that surrendering you to Roman custody is a price worth paying for their own survival. Betrayal becomes a familiar, bitter pattern across these final years, each new host eventually weighing your value against Rome's demands and finding, time after time, that protecting you simply isn't worth the risk. You feel that pattern settle into something like exhausted resignation as the years accumulate. A man once feared across the entire ancient world, now reduced to running from city to city, kingdom to kingdom, always one step ahead of an empire that has never once, in all these years, stopped wanting you dead. Eventually, the running simply runs out of places left to go. You find yourself in a small kingdom in Asia Minor, having taken refuge with a local ruler who has, like so many hosts before him, ultimately agreed to Roman pressure demanding your surrender. Roman soldiers surround the fortress where you're staying, and you feel, watching that final encirclement close in from the walls above, a strange, complete calm settle into your chest. You are old now, decades removed from Cannae, from the Alps, from the young, furious general who once brought the greatest power of the ancient world to the brink of total collapse. But the fury that carried you through all of it hasn't fully faded, and neither has your absolute refusal to give Rome the final satisfaction of parading you through its streets and chains. You have carried, for years, a small vial of poison specifically for this moment, anticipating exactly this outcome long before it finally arrived. You feel the walls closing in fully now, Roman soldiers moving through the compound below, and you understand with total clarity that there is no path left that doesn't end with your capture within the next several minutes. You will not give them that. You drink the poison alone, in a small room in a kingdom far from Carthage, far from the mountains you once crossed with elephants and thousands of men who never made it to the other side, far from the fog-shrouded shores of Trasimene and the blood-soaked fields of Cannae where you once delivered the single greatest military catastrophe Rome would ever experience. You feel the poison begin its work, your vision softening at the edges, your breathing slowing toward something final. Somewhere, distantly, you can hear Roman soldiers finally breaching the outer rooms of the compound, arriving, as they always eventually did across these final bitter years. One crucial moment too late to claim the one prize Rome wanted more than any other victory this entire long war ever offered. They will never drag you through Roman streets in chains. You made sure of that. At 9 years old, kneeling at an altar with your hand pressed into warm sacrificial blood, swearing an oath you kept in every possible sense, until your very last breath. Rome eventually wins this long, brutal rivalry completely, and within a century will erase Carthage itself from the map so thoroughly that ancient accounts describe the ground being ritually cursed to prevent the city from ever rising again. Your name survives that erasure anyway. Roman military academies will study your tactics at Cannae for the rest of the empire's history, and long after that across 2,000 years of warfare that follows. Commanders separated from you by millennia, fighting with weapons and strategies you could never have imagined, will still study the same double envelopment you executed on that ancient Italian plain, because the fundamental brilliance of it never actually goes out of date. Roman mothers, for generations after your death, will still invoke your name to frighten disobedient children, a fear so deeply embedded into the culture that even centuries later, the phrase warning that Hannibal is at the gates remains a shorthand for absolute existential danger. You feel that legacies settle now, heavy and strange, into this final, quiet moment of the story. You did not win the war you swore, as a child, to fight for the rest of your life. Rome outlasted you, outlasted Carthage itself, built an empire that would eventually stretch across most of the known world. But somewhere in that outcome, something else survived too, proof etched permanently into military history that the greatest power in the ancient world could be brought by one furious, brilliant man and the army he led across mountains no one believed an army could cross, to within a single decision of total, catastrophic collapse. You don't need to carry any of this weight a moment longer. Let the altar fade first. The blood-warm stone beneath a 9-year-old's hand. The oath that shaped an entire life before that life had even properly begun. Let it dissolve quietly into darkness. Let the mountains fade next. The frozen passes, the elephants lost to snow and falling stone. The brutal cost paid before the real war had even started. Let the battles fade. Trebia's icy river, the fog rolling off Trasimene's blood-red shoreline. The staggering, unbearable scale of Cannae's single, catastrophic afternoon. Even the ending, the long exile. The final poison taken alone in a small room far from everything you once called home. Let it soften now. The way the sharpest edges of any story eventually soften once it has finally been told all the way through. You don't have to be Hannibal anymore. You don't have to be anyone at all right now. Just breath. Slow and even. Just warmth, heavy and familiar, wherever you're actually resting tonight. Just the wide, quiet dark, opening up around you the way it always does, patient and unhurried, ready to hold you exactly as long as you need. Let your body sink a little deeper now. Let your breathing slow further. On its own, without needing to be told to. Let this whole story loosen its grip, drifting gently away into the same soft, endless dark that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to convince the world it never would. You are safe. You are at rest, and there is nothing left now but sleep, arriving slowly the way it always eventually does, quiet, complete, and entirely yours.